What is the key to a perfectly edited scene in a movie? Film editing is a delicate and often subjective art form, so what are the important elements to keep track of to make the scene do what it is supposed to do? Put another way, since the goal of any good scene should be to have an effect on the audience, to further the overall story of the movie as a whole, how can you use the different visual and audio pieces at your disposal to create the response you want in your viewers? I'm AJ, a filmmaker and storyteller, and today, let's dive into this topic by looking at one of my favorite scenes from The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. It may not be the most stand-up and cheer scene, or the most tear-jerking scene.
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you!
But I love it because of how well it uses editing to affect the viewer's emotions. I'm talking about the scene that gave an entire generation of visceral hatred for cherry tomatoes. Faramir's sacrifice. Heads up. Spoilers for The Lord of the Rings ahead. The Lord of the Rings films are probably the best book-to-screen adaptation I have ever seen. While they do diverge from the source material,
Go home.
their overall level of faithfulness to the story, characters, and themes of the original book are remarkable. Add to that the fact that you have a top-tier cast, great visuals, and a masterful musical score, and you get a magnificent trilogy of films. Most trilogies have at least one film that's markedly worse than the other entries in the series, but not so with The Lord of the Rings. Both the first and second movies are well constructed and satisfying to watch, but the final film, The Return of the King, may be the best of the three. It wraps up the characters' journeys in spectacular, emotional fashion. While the grand battle scenes and speeches are fantastic, I want to focus on a slightly smaller moment today. As the forces of Mordor launch their final invasion of Gondor, the ruined city of Osgiliath, former capital of the kingdom, has been overrun. Denethor, the steward of Gondor, tells his son Faramir that he will not yield the fields of the Pelennor without another fight. Despite Faramir knowing it's hopeless to try to retake Osgiliath, he bows to his father's will and rides out to attempt the impossible. Denethor, who is just a really awful father in these films, let's be honest.
Always you cast a poor reflection on me. Do not trouble me with Faramir. I know his uses and they are few.
Shows no remorse for Faramir, since he isn't his older brother, the much-loved Boromir. While the scant company of horsemen under Faramir's command ride out of Minas Tirith, Denethor blithely eats his dinner and asks Pippin the Hobbit, recently sworn to his service, to sing him a song. Pippin is distraught by the tragedy happening out beyond the city walls, and sings a sweet and haunting song before breaking down into tears. Why does this scene work so well? The sad and bitter emotions of the scene are communicated to the audience in three ways: the actors' performances, the music and sound mixing, and most of all, the visual editing. Let's break these elements down one at a time, and see what we can learn about filmmaking from this scene. Now first of all, the actors are all delivering stellar performances here. The non-speaking actors do well. The soldiers solemnly riding out to battle, their grieving loved ones throwing flowers before their horses' hooves as they pass. But the actors with lines also play their roles perfectly. Gandalf, aghast at the madness of throwing away men's lives out of pride. Faramir, empty at the knowledge that his father loves his dead brother but doesn't care about him. Denethor, cold and uncaring as he eats his dinner while his son and subjects are slaughtered pointlessly. And Pippin, turning his tears into a song for the amusement of the terrible lord he is sworn to serve. You can see the choices the actors made to embody their characters. Faramir barely looks at Gandalf while he talks to him, trying to avoid being dissuaded from the course he's taken. Once out of the city, his gaze is fixed on the ruins of Osgiliath out across the plain. He knows he is riding to his doom, but he is determined to do what his father has asked of him and try to live up to the great deeds of Boromir.
Never again will the land of my people fall into enemy hands!
Pippin is teary-eyed the whole time he waits on Denethor, grieving while his lord blithely munches on tomatoes. Denethor devours his meal with relish, twisting apart chicken and stuffing his mouth. Not only does he not care about his son's sacrifice, but he can enjoy a good meal while the rest of the city watches the one-sided attack in sorrow. If you want a scene to emotionally resonate with your audience, you need actors who can deliver emotionally resonant performances. This scene, and the Lord of the Rings films as a whole, work because the actors are both very good at what they do and are also very well cast. There isn't anyone I can think of in these films who seems miscast, like they should have played someone else or don't really fit as the role they have. This is quite impressive, especially since it's not just renowned actors like Sir Ian McKellen in the scene, but also relative unknowns, especially when these movies were made, like Billy Boyd and David Wenham. Next, the music and sound mixing in this scene add a great deal to the emotional gut punch it delivers. The song Pippin sings is the most obvious piece here, but there are some nice other touches too, like the sound effects as Denethor brutally rips apart chicken and squelchily bites down on tomatoes. The mixing is also great in that there is almost no ambient sound as Pippin sings, so all we hear is his singing and a few key dramatic sound effects, like the horse's hooves, or the sword being drawn, or arrows releasing from bowstrings. The song's melody was composed by Billy Boyd himself, while the lyrics are adapted from a poem in the Lord of the Rings book. The poem in the book is a walking song that the hobbits sing as they make their way through the Shire towards Frodo's new house at Crick Hollow. This song was transplanted to a completely different scene for the movie, and the lyrics in the movie version were changed slightly to give a more melancholy feel to the song. Even so, I admire how much of the book's poetry and dialogue wording is used in the films. Although it may be placed in a new context or spoken by a different character, it shows how much respect and appreciation the film's creators had for the material they were adapting. That just seems like it's getting increasingly rarer and rarer these days. But I digress. Music and sound in general are extremely important aspects to consider when creating an emotionally charged scene. Music is powerful. Beyond any other art form, it touches the emotions most easily and most often. Just think about it. How often have you gotten goosebumps or felt tears in your eyes when reading a book or looking at a painting, compared to when that song or that piece of music comes on? Because of this, music is instrumental, see what I did there, in manipulating the viewer's emotions. This is more difficult than it sounds, though. It is quite easy to fall into the trap of going overboard with the emotion of your music, to the point where your manipulation is obvious and seems ham-fisted. This is how you can have a scene with sad visuals and sad music that becomes unintentionally funny because it is just trying too hard. To avoid falling into this snare, you have to be careful and subtle in how you weave in the music and sound. Ask yourself some questions like, would the scene work better without music? Maybe without sound at all? If it does need sound or music, what's the best combination to get the result you want without shoving the feeling you're trying to communicate into the audience's face? Working through these kinds of questions will lead to the kind of potent, emotional sound mixing we hear in this scene. Finally, and most importantly, let's talk about the visual editing of this scene. The imagery is what ties this scene together. The shots of the soldiers, bright armored, riding forward with banners waving. The shots of the orcs, gathering in greater and greater numbers as they ready their cruel arrows. The shots of Denethor eating, chewing up his food as his subjects are chewed apart on the field below. However, these images alone are not enough. What matters most of all is how these shots link together, creating connections and a more powerful effect than any single image could create on its own. Let's just look at this shot by shot so you can see what I mean. We see Pippin singing, to establish where the music is coming from. Then, we see the horses' hooves pounding the earth and their riders pushing forward. Next is a shot of the orcs, showing us what awaits the horses and riders we just saw. Another shot of the riders in their thin line, followed by a massive crowd of orcs, lurking in the ruins, watching them come. We then cut back to Denethor, putting food into his mouth. This does more than just show us that he is still eating. Through what is known as the Kuleshov effect, it links the idea of Denethor eating with the idea of the soldiers and orcs. I'll come back to that in just a moment, but let's continue looking at the scene first. Faramir draws his sword, urging his men onwards, as Pippin sings about traveling
To the edge of night.
The horsemen gallop towards Osgiliath, the orcs draw back their bows, and Denethor rips apart a piece of chicken. Now this is powerful. The two linked ideas of Denethor eating and the coming battle are fusing to foreshadow the results of that battle through a metaphor. Instead of seeing men dying, limbs ripped apart and blood flowing, we see chicken torn and tomato juice dribbling. The effect of this is more shocking than seeing the actual carnage would be, since we as the audience expect to see the battle, but instead see only a meal. The brutality hits harder through metaphor than it would have through plain visuals, because we're picturing it all in our heads instead of simply just seeing it with our eyes. The imagination creates a far more ghastly image than anything the filmmakers could have conjured up. Now, this emotional blow is driven home by the final image of the scene. Gandalf, sitting alone, hunched and hollow-eyed in a deserted street. Visual editing is about more than just the images you use to tell the story. I mentioned the Kuleshov effect earlier. This is a film editing technique discovered by the early Russian filmmaker Lev Kuleshov. Basically, two shots put together create a different meaning than those two shots would have separately. Weaving shots together is how the meaning is created. The context of the shot before and the shot after is what gives any given image in a scene its meaning. Because of this effect, you can use visuals that seem to say one thing on first glance to create an entirely new message. On the face of it, Denethor eating food is just a man eating his dinner. But once you start interspersing shots of the soldiers and the orcs, the audience sees a new meaning in these shots, one that would not have been there apart from this editor-created context. So, when you're creating a scene, don't just think about what visuals you want. Think about how those visuals can blend together to create a deeper, richer meaning for the scene. Thanks for watching. Let me know down in the comments below what scene affected you the most from The Lord of the Rings. I hope you enjoyed hearing about how to weave together acting, sound, and visual editing to create an emotionally effective scene. If you'd like to see more video essays about storytelling, film, and television, please like and subscribe. Now, go out there and create stories.